All right, welcome back. If your sales have stalled, the fastest way forward is to learn from what isn't working and turn those lessons into structure. Today, Mel Meyers shows us how to turn mistakes into momentum. Welcome, guys. We are Nate and
Right.
Simone, and we talk all things marketing. Let's get into it.
All right.
Yeah, welcome, Mel. Nice to see you. I think we talked about this earlier about what we talk about on the show. Um, Visibility, viability, and value are kind of like our pillars, if you will.
Hmm.
So the visibility, you can't grow what people can't see externally or internally. Viability, you're aligning your marketing, your sales and delivery and your operations so that your revenue repeats predictably. And then value, we're building transferable, sellable systems that outlast the founder. That's the it in a nutshell.
Hmm.
So just to get into who Mel Myers is, from the research and the bio that you provided, we know that you're from New York originally.
Correct.
Um, you're a Dartmouth engineering grad. You started in Procter and Gamble
Correct.
for manufacturing. All right, and you were also involved with operations leadership at Libby Owens Ford.
Hmm.
Awesome. So I'll let you kind of tell us some more about who you are and how you got here. How about that?
That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, very interesting because up until Libby Owens Ford, I was pretty much a corporate guy and got my basic training at Procter and Gamble, which was terrific basic training, both from operations standpoint and from a marketing standpoint. When I was at Libby Owens Ford, I was running one of the large glass divisions, and it was about 600 million. And one of my customers was a small company that made automotive glass and sold it to Ford and General Motors and to people who made windows and doors. And I was very involved with them. And as a result of that, a small group of Merrill Lynch guys formed a VC group and acquired that company, that small company. And they found out that I knew a lot about it, and they decided to bring me into the VC group. Now, I left corporate America to go into be an entrepreneur, and that's really when I made the transition. From then on, I was pretty much a entrepreneurial individual. And what we did is we ran the business and ran it for about 2 years, and we turned it around and were able to sell it for about 7 times EBITDA. And so I cashed out a little bit. I had some more sweat equity than fundamental equity. I was okay. So I had some walking around money, and I decided I would like to do this again. I like the idea of the challenge of going into a new organization and having to learn the technology, learn the people, win the people over, and then chart a course for success. So I found that very exciting. It caused a little bit of a problem because I tended to move around a little bit. My family got a little disrupted, but it all worked out in the end. So I did that, and then happened to be looking for the next opportunity, and found it in Silicon Valley. Just to so
Was
from
that
I went from glass making to chip making, and
Hey, they're not unrelated, right?
All right.
Both made with
and
silicon.
yeah, the interesting thing was that there was the company was Varian Brothers, and Varian Brothers had deep roots in Silicon Valley over the years, and I think they actually invented the radar. And a guy who had worked for me way back in the old days was now out there, and he was running a division, and he had just hired a general manager to run the division. And just called him up and I said, "Hey, Dick, what are you doing?" And he told me, and he said, "Hey, I just hired this guy, and if you're available, maybe you could come out and coach him up and train him." So I did.
Mm.
So for, 2 or 3 months, I was going back and forth to Ohio, and interestingly enough, I was really mentoring the individual, and frankly, what happened was he and his boss, who hired me, didn't hit it off. And I went to the boss and I said, "I don't think this is going to work out." I don't even know why he hired him, but in the end, so he said to me, "Hey Mel, are you retired?" And I said, "No, I'm not retired." And he said, "Would you like to take over this business?" I said, "Sure." So
Mm.
I did. And it kind of moved
Okay.
my
Wow.
so here I was in Silicon Valley, and it was in the 90s, and all hell was breaking loose. The technology
Mm.
was going a mile a minute.
Yeah.
It was, if you remember, it's kind of Moore's law. The
Mm.
technology was
Yep.
doubling or every
Every
18
2 years.
months, and
Yeah.
nobody could keep up.
Yeah.
And
It's
and
a
I
bit
and
like
I was
now
yeah.
with
Well,
AI.
I was a double degree mechanical engineer, not electrical, so I was a little bit
Uh-huh.
behind. So I
Hmm.
would meet with the vice president of technology once a week and get trained and so on. But that point was something that would kind of it did me in, so to speak. We actually were able to turn that business around again. We sold it to a competitor, and I was looking for the next thing to do, and I was really smitten by the Silicon Valley bug, and I wanted
Mm.
to stay out there. And I could not get a executive position. I had developed a good reputation for an operating guy, and in fact, I actually was flown to Paris to interview with a board of a company out in Silicon Valley. Didn't get the job, and in the end, it was obvious that I didn't get it because I wasn't a Silicon Valley guy. I
Mm.
didn't come from the technology. I was a mechanical
Mm.
engineer, good management skills, good strategic insight, fairly good with people, but I didn't know the technology enough
Mm.
to get it. So I came back to Ohio and bought a small company, manufacturing company, and ran it for 25 years. Um, and then decided that was enough. And so I went on to be doing this kind of the sales QB. And frankly, one of the reasons it gets back to kind of the theme I went through over those 25 years, I went through the ups and downs of being running a small company, 6 million, 7 million, totally undercapitalized. I bought the company for $500 and a pretty good loan from Chase Bank. And so it was a typical LBO. And so we were undercapitalized. And you talk about learning from mistakes and things that didn't go well. We went through tough periods where we didn't have good cash flow. And one of the things that I learned is the idea of cash management. I was always thinking optimistically, and that's a good thing. I'll be optimistic. But what I learned is you really need to plan for the worst case scenario. It's good to be optimistic, but you better have a worst case scenario plan. And initially, I didn't have that, so things became a problem, and I wasn't prepared. So I had to adjust, and I had some significant problems as a result of that. But we made it through. We made it through the Lehman Brothers crash, and we made it through COVID, and and built the company back up. And what I learned was better planning in terms of, okay, got a good plan, good strategy with a real good value proposition, somewhat unique, but let's plan for the worst case scenario. And we did that. So we made it through COVID. We're in good shape. So that kind of brings you up to date on what I've been doing. And
Okay. All right. So would you say then that that is your most valuable lesson that you learned from something that didn't go right?
Yeah,
Or
I think,
do you have
yeah.
another one? Or
Well, I think the other thing that I learned was more of a somewhat of an operational thing as opposed to a strategic thing, and that is how valuable it is to have people, especially on the sales side, who are from the industry. I went through a period where, and we did a very rigorous recruiting process with group meetings, group assessment. We were very thorough and rigorous about it. But I had this idea, and I think it was because I had gone from industry to industry and I adjusted okay. You know, I went from soap making to glass making to chip making and eventually dehumidifier manufacturing. And I thought, well, if, these skills are transferable. But I have to say, on the sales side, it was really critical to have people who knew the industry, particularly the technology in the industry. And we struggled because of that for a period of time until we could make some adjustments. So when you talk about lessons learned, that was a big one. Make sure the people who are really running the sales organization are from the industry.
Mhm. Okay, so how would you say that learning that lesson changed the way that you lead then?
Well, it changed it very specifically because I then focused on when I was doing the recruiting, one of the requirements was the person has to be not only from the industry, but but thought of as a thought maker, an influencer in the industry.
Oh.
So, for example, it might be involved in ASHRAE, which is a industry organization for a HVAC business. Okay. So they have a kind of a technical pedigree because what we were selling was a technical solution.
Okay.
Oh.
And I mean, do you feel that people, the insiders, people that know, understand the industry, what is it about them that makes them like a better fit in that case?
Well, I think besides the obvious that they kind of know the industry,
Yeah.
it's the idea that the right person um, has um, has the qualities that generate respect and confidence. They trust the customers already trust them. They work with the person, she or he. And that's really important. The integrity part of it is important. All right. There are plenty of people who have the technical expertise, but they don't have the reputation for being somebody that you can really count on.
It makes it easier to open doors and get people to
Absolutely.
trust you right off the
Absolutely.
bat. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
And the other thing is it's a little bit different in some respects, but the people that the individual is mentoring or coaching, the salespeople, let's say, they get a rub off from that, that you come from an organization that's you can count on, a highly, high integrity, those kind of things.
Hmm. Yeah. Makes sense. Okay. Let's see here. Hmm.
How does somebody build that? Like build that kind of a reputation and and build that kind of trust because you're saying like if they in order to really they should be a part of the industry and be well grounded in it in order to have that kind of a position like but you've got to start somewhere. Where do they start?
Well, I think those people usually come up through the industry.
Mm.
They actually come up through the industry, especially if you're looking for somebody who's, let's say, on the younger side. All right. They've come through the industry. All right. And now you can find people who are, been in the industry 20 years, 30 years. Um, and they have the kind of reputations that the customers, respect and admire. So
And the customers would be like a bigger, like the companies, they're bigger clients, that kind of thing. So like they've been dealing with the particular salesperson for a number of years.
absolutely, yeah,
Is
that's
that
it.
it?
Yeah, they have. So they either have a reputation that precedes them, so to speak, or they know the people because they've been in the industry.
I'm thinking of like examples of times when someone entered into an industry from a different industry and was able to disrupt that industry. Like I'm thinking like Elon Musk, for lack of a better one, but
Okay.
he was, technology, right? And he entered into the auto industry, completely, reshaped the whole thing
Mhm.
because he took it from. Do you think that that is,
Well,
valuable though?
I think it is valuable and it
Yeah.
can be valuable. I think that, but you have to have the agility to make the change. All right. Especially if you're coming from an industry that's very highly, let's say, technical, and you go into an industry that's not real technical. Your expertise could be on the technical side, but the keys to success in the new is strategy, leadership, those kind of things.
Okay. Um, so let's take this in a slightly different path here. So getting into like our pillars that we talk about with visibility, um, finding the right leads, decision making, empowering your team, all of which I think is probably important to conversation. In our estimation, visibility and having visibility is not just about having more marketing. It's having clarity, that attracts the right people, first of all, and it's also like letting people within the organization have access to the information they need so they can make decisions without having to bother the business owner, you know um, and that kind of thing. So when you hear from someone, and they say something like, "We just need more leads," where where would you start um, in that case?
Well, I think that where you start is to really dissect what the people are saying. We need more leads. Let's talk about that. What do you mean by that? All right. Do you need just more leads and they're good leads? Or you need more good leads? Or, let's get into the details because the details are what's going to determine the plan of attack. You may be getting good leads, but not enough. So then you got to think about, well, okay, how are we going to generate more leads? Then you're looking at your website, you're looking at industries, shows, things like that. So one of the things that I've learned over the years is you really got to delve into the root cause analysis of any situation, all right, and get to the bottom of it. And a good example is I oftentimes we get in a situation, or I get in a situation where I'm talking to small business owners and they say, we have a sales problem. We got a sale. I need your help. We got a sales problem. So I say, well, tell me a little bit about the sales problem. And what we find out is it's not a sales problem. It's a problem that you don't have a good leader in the sales position. All right.
Mm.
It's not a sales problem. It's a problem that you don't have a sales process that's repeatable that people follow religiously with no variations. So it or it could be your basic sales strategy is off base. So it could be your culture's toxic, so you can't hire good people. So what I like to do is really try and drill down into the root cause. What's the root cause and what do you mean by we have a sales problem? Well, our sales haven't grown in the last 3 years. Okay. All right. That doesn't mean it's a sales problem.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah,
So
um,
what I really learned is that you've got to get to the root cause, and then you've got to put a plan together that it really addresses the root cause, not the symptoms.
And when you're
What's
looking for
your,
that root cause, like what's your process
yeah,
for finding it?
that's what I was gonna
Well,
say.
it's multi-pronged. I mean,
Yeah.
it could be, meeting with people and it could be going out and talking to customers and it's all of those things. But the key thing is to have a mindset that you're penetrating. You're saying, well, what do you mean by that? Or tell me more about that. So you're asking questions rather than telling people the answers. Well, what you need to do is just go out and, sharpen up your selling skills, work harder. No, what you want to do is you're coaching people of how to really do better. And that's one of the roles of a leadership is coaching.
Do
And
you
or
have do you have like a go-to first line of questioning in that case?
well, I
Like,
think yes, I do. And when I get involved in an organization or a company, the first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that the culture is not a problem. Tell me about your turnover. How difficult it is to hire people. Tell me about your performance review program. Tell me about how you communicate with your employees. One of the things that I did, for example, every Friday, I send an email out to the whole company, bringing them up to date on what went on during the week, goods and bads. I said, oh, we had a problem here. We're reacting to it. We got this order. So there's an idea of transparency, so people know that they develop a relationship with the organization and the owner. So the first thing I do is look at the culture. Tell me about the culture. If the culture's a problem, it doesn't matter if we fix the sales system. It doesn't matter if we fix engineering and my analogy is you're building a house. You want to build
yeah,
a house on a shaky foundation? No.
yeah, right.
And I think you and I spoke about that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Gonna be on shifting sands there.
Right.
Um,
It's
okay.
interesting.
So that, I mean, that we're kind of getting into concepts of like viability. So when it comes to that visibility portion and attracting, the right type of people and making sure that everybody within the organization has access to information they need when they need it and all that, are you concerning yourself with, let's say, what if the problem is an ICP fit, for example? Are you working through on that? Let's say that you determined that the culture is not the problem, and then are you getting into, maybe the problem is that your ideal client profile is not the right one. You're not actually going after the right type
Well,
of people, or
the second phase that I take a look at is strategy. Okay.
okay,
You look at it, you say, okay, the culture is good. It can be improved. We can do some things to improve it, but it's a good foundation. The employees are, pretty much doing what they need to do without being told, and the feedback is good. They're getting increases. You're keeping up with the wages and the benefits and the community and all that kind of stuff. So that's okay. So then you really want to get into strategy. I mean, do we have a strategy? And I like to start with the business strategy. Is the business strategy sound? Do you have a unique value proposition that you can build a company on and achieve the things that you're talking about? Because, it's like the culture. If you have a strategy that doesn't give you any sustainable competitive advantage, I don't care how good your people are. I don't care how good your sales system is. You're not going to succeed. So I like to look at the business strategy. And then from that, once I'm comfortable that the business strategy is okay, then I like to look at the sales strategy specifically. All right. What is
hmm
your unique value proposition?
hmm
Why are our customers going to buy from you?
hmm
All right. And some of those are, they're very specific, and some of them are kind of a little vague, let's put it that way. I mean, you know, I like working with Mel because he always tells me what he thinks,
yeah,
whether I like it or not. All right. And I always tell my people, treat the customers like they're your best friend. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So again, so you go through the culture, go through the business strategy, go through the sales strategy. And once yeah, you're working on some other things at the same time, but once you're convinced that that foundation is solid, all right, that we have a competitive strategy, all right, that's going to allow us to achieve our objectives, all right, that the consistent, predictable sales growth. Then you start to concentrate on the operational kinds of things. All right.
Hmm.
And it's more of a question of how do we make things better than, boy, we got a really turnaround situation here. Now, you may find going through that there are some things that are really not up to the standards that they need to be, and you have to address those. It could be people and so on, but you don't. I always like to address the people situation after I get the systems in place.
Gotcha.
So I don't
With
want to do a bunch of sales training before I have the sales process, laid out and be repeatable and have people following it,
yeah,
and then you can do.
presumably
Oh,
your the sales process, the sales strategy systems are going to kind of be a derivative of the overall business strategy. When
absolutely.
when in your mind, can you give us a quick definition of what you think strategy is in your case, like from your perspective?
I'm sorry. What do you think about strategy?
Well, yeah, give us a quick definition from your perspective of a what do you mean but when you say like the business strategy? Like what does that mean?
Well, I'll give you the strategy to me, your core strategy, you ought to be able to define it in a sentence or two. All right. And it really goes back to something that Jim Collins was covered in his book, the Good to Great. And that is, what can you be the best at in your industry? What can you be the best at realistically? And there's a lot of locker room talk about, oh, we can have the best product or we can have the best, but you're a small company and you don't have a lot of R&D, and that's how we were. So we determined as a team we couldn't have the best product, okay, necessarily. We could have a product that's defect free, all right, but might not be on the leading edge of technology in our industry. So what we decided is we could be the best at customer service, because customer service is really a mindset. And so what we did is we trained we educated our people, we trained our people on, you know, how to provide wow customer service. All right. And what that meant. And it meant things like if you got a lead, you had to respond to that lead in 4 hours or less. All right. And it's really interesting because what would happen, and I was at times I was the first line sales leader. When we went into the battery business, I was running that business and I was the sales leader. And what you did is as soon as you got a lead, you'd call somebody up and you'd say, hey, this lead came in on our website. And so tell me about what you're interested in. And it might have been an hour, maybe 2 hours, the lead from when the lead came in. And I'm telling you, the people would say, I can't believe you called me back in 2 hours.
Yeah. Two
I'm
hours.
calling your competitor. They haven't called me in a week.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, little things like that. I mean, they really sound trivial, but they're not. And
Hmm.
and when you have that mentality, it just builds to where
Yep.
you develop a reputation that you're going to be able to develop the relationship with the customers where they'll lean in your direction.
When it comes to empowering teams to like make decisions and that kind of thing, is there, one thing that you recommend that they pay attention to on a weekly basis to help improve their decision making? Or is it more of like a basket of things, or what do you think?
Well, I think that the key for individual performance improvement is a combination of a number of things. One is to get regular feedback and coaching from their superior, all right, or anybody who could help them, all right. And it's incumbent upon the leadership to do coaching. I mean, that's one of the most important things of leadership is coaching. All right. Not just criticizing people, not just is coaching them. And so I think that's really critical is to make sure that the leadership and even at the supervisor level, supervisor level and the hourly employees is the coaching. Is that, let's talk about how to do that better. All right.
So you're recommending that the company like creates a coaching program
Oh,
in the
absolutely.
business?
Well, I think that
Or
I
even
think
sends their leaders out to a coaching program to learn because
right.
there's coaching third party consultants that will train your people as well in those areas.
Yeah, I mean there's no question there's a place for improving the skills of training and coaching, but most of the leaders know what their employees are doing and not doing, and they can coach them. They say, "Hey, Joe, when you handle this situation, that was great, but this one, you didn't do the same thing. Why not? What happened?" All right. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a formal training program, although don't get me wrong, there's places for training. All right.
No.
But the interaction with your employees, all right, is almost on a casual kind of basis or informal, I should say. All right.
Okay. So how, like how does, because it almost sounds like, oh, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're creating this coaching program, then in a way you are kind of I guess the effect there is that so during the course of the coaching, then you are kind of coaching them on how to make the decisions that they need to make on their own, the kinds of things that they need to be taking into consideration, the paths that they need to kind of navigate, and that's kind of the situations that
Yeah,
am I hearing that right? Yeah.
I
Okay.
think generally that's correct. All right, but
Okay.
I think that the key thing where all of this boils down to is again, it's the culture. You have a culture where you're going to nurture the employees, all right? And where does that come from? What we did is I said it, we set a goal. We want to be a preferred place to work. We're
Yeah.
going to be a preferred place to work. What the hell does that mean? So we had to define what it meant. It means things like benefits and wages, they had to be in a certain percentile of the community. So we said 75%. All right. And we actually ended up we had to give increases because and we had to I figured out how to fund them because we weren't
Yeah.
up to the 75%. All right. So I
Yeah.
think if you're talking about being a preferred place to work, the question then becomes one. What constitutes a preferred place to work? Is it just wages and benefits? No, because that's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You got to have a certain level of salaries and benefits and things like that. But beyond that, it's really how the people are treated, all right, and whether you have a culture that empowers people. Now,
Yeah.
empowering people requires training. It
Yeah.
requires accountability.
Yeah.
All right. People have to know they're going to be held accountable. And if they're not doing what they need to do, they're going to be discussed, they're going to be coached, they're going to be things like that. But there is a level of accountability. Um, an empowered organization is that people know that they have the they have the authority and the freedom to make decisions and do things because they've earned it. They earned it by their attitude. They earned it by their skill level. They earned it by the fact that they do the right thing without being told.
Yeah. Gotcha. Okay. So, empowering a team first starts with, is the culture good? What are we building on here? Can we expand on that? Um, you know, it has to be good, and we have to have an idea of what that looks like in order to be able to train them on that, right? So that makes sense. And then it just kind of like snowballs from there, right? That's kind of the idea. I like that. I like that. Okay.
I'm wondering if it also snowballs into making your product the best and or
Oh,
better,
absolutely,
you
absolutely.
know. Yeah.
Absolutely. There's no question that, well, you don't want to have a preferred place to work just because you want a preferred place to work. You want a preferred place to work because that's the ingredient that's going to allow you to hire the people that you need, the talent. It's going to allow you to motivate those people to do their best. All right. Work together, not just individually, but as a team. All right. Why? Because they're going to make good product, going to have costs are going to be under control. The customers are going to be happy. All right. And they're going to be rewarded for what they accomplish versus their goals. So it's that accountability again, you know.
Do you have a recommended one thing, from my experience in corporate culture, was the amount of meetings that we had. Do you have a recommendation when it comes to meeting schedules and that kind of thing, or is that something you get into, or
Well, I think my basic idea is don't have meetings you don't need to have. And I think you've got to
simple?
look from you got to really take that attitude of why are we having this meeting? You know,
Mhm.
and it's not as easy as it sounds because there's always I always found a little bit of a tug of war because you want to get people involved. Let's get the team
Yeah.
together. All right. Let's make sure everybody understands what's going on. All right. That kind of thing. Let's get all these people in the room because they're the people that we need to solve the problem. So there's a tendency to get dragged into that. All right. And you really have to think about, you know, is this meeting really necessary? Or is dealing with this issue best suited not having a meeting? Maybe you appoint two or three teams and you say, go study this, determine this, then let's get back together for a meeting. You don't have three meetings, you have, one meeting where the group gets back together and says, here's what we found, here's what we're going to do.
So, from the thinking of visibility, so that presumably that's primarily marketing. Marketing is, working on increasing the visibility out there, making sure that they're being seen by the right people in the right places at the right time, so that those leads start to come into the business.
Right.
What is your recommendation for community? Because this is kind of like the oil and water, right? Marketing and sales, right? So,
All right.
how do you recommend marketing and sales communicate?
Well, I think that gets really back to what I was saying earlier about strategy. If you
Yes.
have the right strategy, that interaction is going to be defined. All right. Here's our strategy. Our strategy is to do the following in terms of the message. All right. For example, the message that we decided we wanted to get across to the industry was that with our company, you don't buy a piece of equipment, you get a stress-free experience.
Hmm.
That's what you get. All right. And so then you're talking, and that was our message a lot. And so marketing would talk about that. They would say, all right, come work for Briar, you're going to get a stress-free experience. All right. And
Presumably you had to figure out first what that would look like,
oh,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
So
Oh,
that's where
no
the
question.
strategy comes
Yeah.
in.
yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
exactly. 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 All right.
Hmm.
No question about it. Yeah. Yeah, you have a stress-free experience because the product you're going to get is going to get delivered on time. It's going to work the way it's supposed to work. All right. If there's a problem, you're going to get service immediately. All right. if you call the company and you want to get a new piece of equipment, you're going to get a response quickly. So, and as important as anything, if if we feel, any of us feel, and I played this role a lot with C-suite people, is hey, if I was in your shoes, this is what I would do. Giving advice. This is what I would do. All right. Or, hey, you know what you're doing? You should stop that. And I would say that in privacy. Okay.
This is you talking to the client.
Yes.
Yeah, gotcha. It's kind of like the what do you call it? The consultative approach to
Right.
sales.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah,
it's again, I go back to treat him like your best friend. If your best friend's
yeah.
doing something that's gonna be harmful, you must say, hey, Joe or
Right.
Mary,
Yeah,
you ought to think about this.
yeah. This is not the best way to do it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Um, okay. All right. So you mentioned there about handoffs, and this is kind of one of those crucial pieces to that customer experience. Like one of the things part of what the visible, viable, and valuable obviously is like the underlying customer experience there, right?
Right.
And so you want to make sure that you're kind of orchestrating that, and making sure that they have the best possible experience along the way. But if you're going from one thing to the next, there's always a potential for a mess up in the handoff there. Is that something that you have ever experienced, or what in your mind
Oh, I
are
think the
good
answer there is
examples of
yes. I think
handoffs where they
I
get
think
messed
and,
up?
and you talk about learning from your mistakes. One of the
Yeah, there
things
you go. Yeah.
one of the things that we had a problem with is when the refrigerants changed, and we used a lot of the condensing units and the refrigerant. There were some things that were missed in engineering.
Mhm,
So the product didn't perform up to the standards that we had set.
mhm.
So there was handoff issues there. And what we needed to
Yeah.
do was drop back and say, wait a minute, get back to how did this happen? And we did a root cause analysis, and we realized that when engineering made this specific change, they really didn't vet the change thoroughly enough. There was just an oversight. So we had to get back in and look at the procedure. What was wrong with the procedure that allowed them to make that mistake? So we had to
Mm,
change it. And what we had is a root cause. We had basically a root cause analysis process that would
mm,
take that, and then we a team, and there was a structured, we called it a corrective action program, and there would be a root cause analysis done, and then corrective action implemented and tracked and all that kind of stuff. So again, I think it gets back to recognizing that fundamentally you not only need the technical knowledge, but you need the process. You need the systems,
yeah.
whether it's in engineering or whether it's in sales. And it gets back to what we were talking about. Well, you got a sales problem. Well, you don't have a sales problem. You got a sales process problem. All right.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so one of the things that everybody talks about with, corporate culture, is politics, people kind of doing things their own sort of way because there's probably something to do with the size of the company, at some point,
And they believe
you
that they're
know,
going to be recognized too. So it's like that
yeah,
that
holding
source
on
that
to that.
search for recognition and
Yeah,
acknowledgement and the attaboys, the attagirls.
yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the
It's
things
all
that,
part of the culture, right?
right.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And one of the things that I did in these Friday morning emails was
yeah.
give people attaboy. Hey, the production guys
Mm,
did this, they got it out on time, they got it in, the costs were good, things like that. Or Joe and Harry went to a industry meeting and they got 3 customers, and so you're sharing those kind of things with the organization, and it creates the climate where those things are recognized, and it's people feel good about it.
yeah. Um, did you, in your corporate experience and whatnot, have to create certain criteria to keep the deal moving, without politics entering into the issue? Or, I mean, that's getting into some perhaps serious detail within the company, but do you have any recommendations in that case? Like,
Well, yes, I do. And I made some mistakes along those lines in terms of a problem at a customer. All right, let's say a problem, and I got to the because I really wanted to have the best customer service in the industry, and not just the best, but world class customers. You can have the best, but if it's not good because the industry is not good, it
mm,
doesn't accomplish the objective. So I learned, don't say our goal is to have the best service, because the best service
could be a
could be
low
poor.
bar.
It could be poor.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah.
So there was a better way to define that. But anyway,
Mm,
so what would happen is, you get in an issue where something didn't go right. All right. And there was discrepancies between, let's say, a supplier and the customer and our people. All right. And my rule of thumb was, if the situation is black and white, it's black and white. If it's our fault, it's our fault. If it's the customer's fault, you have to tell the customer it's your fault. And you got to be able to demonstrate, and you do it properly. Don't get me wrong. All
yeah,
right.
yeah,
If it's gray, it always goes to the customer. All right. So
yeah, yeah.
so then you have that creates philosophies and attitudes. All right. About, and again, it's not you treat the customer like he's your best friend. So if the customer says, if he has a really unacceptable or the unreasonable position, you tell them this is unreasonable. Let me tell you why. Now you do it properly, all right? You do it
Mhm.
privately if you need to, but you become a person that says, hey, you know, this is the way it is. All right, this is where I see it, and here's why. And 9 times out of 10, they're going to see it. All right. Now, at the same time, and I can tell you an experience that I had, if there's a problem, and we built a dry room where we were making batteries, and it was about $1 million project it was pretty expensive,
Sure.
and the customer was complaining about the workmanship, and he said, "Look, I didn't pay all this money, and this thing looked like crap." So, I was back in the office, and the salespeople were there too. And we kind of went back and forth with the supplier and in terms of, hey, this is not good. We got a problem. We're trying to be the best in the industry, blah, 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 blah. So what I finally did was I got on a plane, I flew to Pennsylvania, and I went to the site and I looked. All right. And I wanted to be able to look the customer in the eye and said, I went there. All right. I'm not talking about what I'm hearing back in the
Yeah,
office. I went there and
yeah.
I climbed up on the roof. I climbed up on the dry room. I looked at it with the customer because and I agreed with him. And I went back and I said, guys, I got to agree with them,
Mm,
you know, and because the workmanship was not acceptable. I mean,
mm,
you'd say, oh yeah, but there's just a little scratch. Well, this guy paid $1 million. If you had your kitchen redone and you said, oh, there's a scratch there, what are your wife's going to say? Oh, get that out of here, all right? You
well,
know?
yeah.
So what we ended up doing was give him a 10% reduction. And I went to the vendor and said, you're going to have to fund that.
Mm, yeah.
So again, it's living the philosophy, and that sets the example, which gets back to the leaders have to set the example. You can't just
Hmm.
talk a good game. You got to play the game,
Gotcha.
even when it's difficult.
Some really good nuggets of wisdom there. I hope everybody's paying attention just out there. But so let's get into our last section here, talking about building a valuable business. You have some experience with this, obviously.
Yeah.
Um, What, in your estimation, are the first 3 to 5 assets that a $2 to $5 million business should document to help make the business more valuable?
Well, I think that the first thing is you need to demonstrate that the employee situation is solid. All right. Because that we always would say we had a circle of success. You know, the company takes care of the employees take care of the customers take care of the company, and it goes around in a circle.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's why having a preferred place of employment is so critical. So what you see is we were building a structure that would eventually end up with a valuable company. All right.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
it really starts with the philosophy of you really have to have an empowered organization where people are doing the right thing without being told. All right. And they're trained to do it. They've been given the tools, they've been given the coaching, so they can do a good job. All right. Without being told. And that gives them the freedom. All right. So number one, you have to be able to point to the culture and the organization. Your turnover went from 5% to 2%. All right. So you're not losing people, you're not doing that. So you're building the company on the people and the philosophy. And then you have to look for, well, what is really the differentiator from a strategic standpoint, all right, that's going to get you the cash flow that you need to reinvest in the company and to reinvest in the people. All right. So you're really looking at, you're looking at strategy, you're looking at product, you're looking at things like cash flow, that kind of thing. But you really you build it on repeatable, predictable sales and earnings. All right.
Yeah, presumably one of those first batches of things you're documenting is the processes then, right? Getting the
Absolutely.
SOPs down. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But that,
It
that
all
also
kind of plays into each other, right? Yeah.
exactly, that's the
Yeah.
point. It really is all part of a crazy quilt, if you will, of what it
Hmm.
takes, but it's clear that you've got to build on the quality of the people. All right.
Yeah.
That's why you do that. All right. I mean, it's nice, you do it because it's nice to treat people right, but from a business standpoint, you have to have a culture that people are going to want to work there and do their best, all right, without having been told. And part of that is they're held accountable. They want to people, good people want to be held accountable, but they also want to be rewarded, all right, for what they achieve.
Yeah, and
More
it's
than
it's
just the money.
usually yeah. It's
Absolutely.
it's usually helpful if the company isn't constantly moving the goalposts too. Like
Right.
Yeah.
um good. All right. So one of the things that we talk about with building a valuable business is incorporating referrals and extending customer lifetime value and that kind of thing. Do you have ways, methods, examples of using renewals, referrals, or how to go about expanding what you're offering to your clients?
Hmm. Well,
Do you
I
have any
think
examples of
again,
ideas?
I think what you need to do is think about how you can leverage what your what your uniqueness is, all right, into growth, into value. All right. And
Okay.
what we ended up doing was recognizing that the battery, when the EV business took off in 2019, 2020, all right, we recognized that our equipment would need to be used in making batteries because the batteries are made in an environment, they have to be made in an environment where there's almost no moisture. Relative humidity is less than 1%.
Mhm.
So what we recognized that, wow, that'll be a good opportunity for the company. So we started to concentrate on using our equipment to to make batteries. But more than that, it gets back also to strategy, which we talked about, is we're trying to say a lot of the customers and competitors that we had were big companies, and that is selling just the equipment, like a component of the dry room, because then there was the room, there was the equipment. Those were the two biggest components. We were just selling the equipment. And what we decided to do was, from a strategic standpoint, how we're going to differentiate ourselves. And we had an excellent reputation for making dehumidifiers and managing the technology. And what we decided to do was to package a dry room and our equipment. And what we did is we established a relationship with a clean room manufacturer who had a good reputation, and he became our resource partner. All right. And we went to the market to offer a package. And there was
Mm,
once, the concept was one point of accountability, one point of responsibility, no finger pointing. Oh, well, the room's not a spec, so it's equipment. No, we took total responsibility. And again, it gets back to the idea of a stress-free experience. You come with us, you're gonna get a stress-free experience. You don't have to worry
mm,
about it. We got it, we
yeah,
got you covered.
yeah.
Um, and so again, it's building on a unique strategy. So we were able to grow the business from 8 million to almost 21 million over a 3-year period because we had come into the industry with a very unique value proposition. All right. And we caught the wave of the electric vehicle market. So, I closed at least 2 jobs that were over $6 million each.
Mm.
And for us, that was huge.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so that's kind of like a an expansion or
It's a
y-
pivot. It's a
yeah,
pivot. It's a strategy pivot based
yeah.
on based on some uniqueness that we had, a strength
Hmm.
that we had.
Kind of
Uh,
double down on that.
right,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly.
Okay. So you exited your business. What in your mind actually moves value beyond just the top line revenue?
Well, I think it was the reputation that we had in terms of people it was the company culture in terms of the stress-free experience. We're going to go out of our way to make sure the customer is happy. We're going to do simple things like answer the phone, respond to things. So you created an organization that people could count on.
Mhm. So your customers could depend on you to provide a great experience, and internally, because you had worked on the culture, your employees had a great time and they stuck around longer.
Right,
You weren't wasting training time and resources on
right,
continually training new people because they stuck around longer. Your customer
right.
presumably stuck around longer as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
True.
All right. Good deal.
All right.
That's very good. Let's see. What else? Anything else? Simone, what do you think here? About ready to wrap up?
Well, um, since we're talking about learning from mistakes, like in this whole process, what mistakes have have your clients learned from, you know, uh, that they made in order to turn around and build better companies, or what mistakes have you made or that you learned from them that maybe helped you
Well,
to turn
yeah,
around?
that's a good question. I think that what we learned and what I learned over my career was I was learning the same thing over again. All right.
It's funny how
You know,
you come up against the same issues over and over
well,
again until you finally learn the
there,
lesson, right?
there is to be, perfectly candid. There are things that you think, oh, I took care of that, and then you find out, wait a minute, we slipped back on that. We didn't follow through on that. We let our guard down. All right. And so you have to be vigilant about making sure that, for example, if you're going to have a preferred place to work, you got to make sure that you're really doing the things that are going to continue that process because of how important it is. So, for example, we started having surveys, confidential surveys with all employees, and when we got the feedback, we played it back to the employees, and whatever they said, there were comments like, management has favorites, they're playing favorites, and we addressed those, and we had it was very public, and we said, yeah, okay, there are some problems, we'll take care of it, or and there were some cases where people had a perception of a situation, and we said, well, it's not exactly that way. So we were trying to correct it. But again, it's that idea of continually reinforcing the philosophy that the company's built on. Make sense?
Yeah, and
Yeah,
it
makes
takes
sense.
quite a few mistakes along the way to figure out what that philosophy is. Is that?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it sounds like you have to constantly keep going back to the fundamentals. Like, what is it? What are our
Absolutely.
core values? What do we really believe?
That's the key, core values.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And we would post those up. These are our beliefs. These are our major goals. We were very transparent. I mean, people,
No.
there was a time when we did this survey where people say they don't know what's going on in the company. We said, oh, what do you mean? Well, we don't. So we started doing stuff and giving them information. All right. It wasn't that we didn't want to. It's just that we didn't think of it. We learned. Oh, yeah, people want to know this. All right.
The workers, you mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
employees. Yeah, absolutely.
Hmm. Believe it or not, they actually care about the company too, right?
Oh, no question about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're good employees. They're not just there to earn a paycheck. They
Oh
actually
no,
care
no,
about
but
their jobs and
but
what they do and about the company as a whole.
but it's kind of a team effort in that you create that. All right, because you can get good people that come from a company. They may have a great attitude, they're great, and they go into a bad culture. All of a sudden, they got a problem.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know.
Here's
The
a
attitude
question.
shifts.
Here's a question related to that. So let's say, what can a company do to encourage learning from mistakes? Like, what is that? What do you
Well,
recommend
I
there?
think I think I think we're it starts with not being concerned about admitting you made a mistake. All right.
Mhm.
I mean, there were times I said, we blew this. We made a mistake. What did you learn from it? All right. What did we learn from it? How do you avoid it in the future? All right. Instead of, denial, denial, denial.
Or instead of, okay, you're fired. Is that seems like a knee-jerk,
Oh,
instantaneous
absolutely.
reaction. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
We actually got an award from UKG, which is an outside HR company, for our empowered organization. And that was a culmination of the things we've been talking about over a few years, making a preferred place to work. And it was
Mhm.
really interesting because I got an email about this contest that they were running for the companies in Ohio. And I thought it was just, honestly, I thought it was just trash mail.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
told them I said, well, what the hell? I'll just tell them what we're doing. And
Hmm.
we ended up winning an award after we got into it. So it was
Nice.
interesting.
Nice.
But I think it
So,
starts with it, not being afraid to admit you made a mistake.
gotcha. So companies should create a sort of process around, being able to admit that a mistake was made so that the learning can actually begin, and
Right.
it's
There's
not
no,
it's not instantaneously punished, you know.
that's exactly right. That's the
Yeah,
point. That's the
yeah.
point. Because
Oh,
it's kind of like if people get punished, what do they say? I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that
I gotta
again.
say it
I'm not
Right.
exactly.
saying
Shuts
that
everything
again.
down. Yeah,
Yeah.
Right.
yeah.
Right. So to create a
You know,
culture of
the
a bit
key
of
thing with human
openness.
behavior, the key thing with human behavior is to catch people doing the right thing
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
and say, hey,
Always
that's
just
great.
catch
Keep doing it.
Yep.
All right.
them.
Awesome. Good stuff.
All
Well,
right.
all right. Anything
I
else,
appreciate
Simone?
appreciate the opportunity.
No. Absolutely,
So
sir.
thanks for
Absolutely.
being here.
Um, do you want to take us out here?
Well, I think we've learned a lot here, and we've learned about helping businesses. Well, first of all, learning from our mistakes and helping the small businesses learn from their mistakes. And also, I really like the part about creating a culture where employees and team members feel comfortable and open enough to come and admit their mistakes, knowing that no, they're not going to be instantaneously punished or fired right off the bat, but they're going to be given that opportunity to learn from the mistake and improve. And in that way, not just help themselves, but also help the company as a whole.
Absolutely. No question about
Right.
it. Right.
So we talked about diagnosing and stabilizing, standardizing and aligning, and also instrumentation and compounding. Did we go through that part? But if we didn't, we can always come back to it another time,
Sure.
if you're willing.
Yeah.
So we greatly appreciate your being here with us,
Thank you.
and if you're watching us right now and you've learned something from this episode, please put it in the comments and let us know what's your biggest takeaway. What's that aha moment that's gonna make you do something different in your business than what you've been doing, so that you learn from your mistakes and do better next time. We want to invite you to take our growth ceiling assessment if you feel like you've hit a growth ceiling in your business, and that revenue, you've reached some success but that revenue is stalled. Take that assessment and we can help guide you into figuring out what it is, and so we
Absolutely.
can make it a bit better. So we thank you so much for being here, Mel, and we'll see you
My
next
pleasure.
time.